How independent can we really see this pact being, and can this pact really be something that is of, meaningful significance?
Saudi Arabia, which has been dependent on the United States of America, is willing to hedge its bets, and the United States of America does not have a problem with it.
The only one that benefits from this is Saudi Arabia. Pakistan has now brought Saudi Arabia under its nuclear umbrella, under its nuclear protection.
It seems like Pakistan at the moment is really the only country in the world that has relations with all three superpowers.
China has Pakistan's back.
We're seeing military commanders fighting against diplomats.
That they cannot control Israel, and Israel will just run amok. On that same day, a Pakistani ship was attacked by Israeli drones.
It's a stain on the honor of the Muslims to the extent that the Westerners are coming to the rescue of the Muslims in Palestine. Where is that brotherhood?
Welcome to Iran Talks. I'm your host, Samer Hakim. The defense pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan not only shapes Persian Gulf security dynamics, it also carries wide-ranging implications for India, Iran, and even occupied Palestine. As Riyadh seeks alternative security guarantees and Islamabad grapples with an economic setback, the deal exposes layered interests, contradictions, and a battle over narratives. The core question is how much of this pact is a practical working alliance and how much is leveraging for political messaging in the region. Joining me today are Ehsan Safarnejad, Tafhim Kiani, and Alok Arora. Welcome to the program. The first question I have is with regards to this pact between Saudi Arabia and given the defense system that Saudi Arabia has and how the weapons are deeply tied with the United States, how independent can we really see this pact being, and can this pact really be something that is of meaningful significance? If I can start with you, please, Tafhim.
Samer, thank you so much. First of all, thanks for inviting me to your show. It's a pleasure to be here. I listen to your podcast with great interest, so it's nice to be here today.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you.
In answer to your question, so I think that is the big question at the moment. Obviously, a lot of details are still to be officially announced, and I think that's probably going to take years, if not months and years. But from what we can tell, I am pretty much certain that the defense agreement that has taken place between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, first of all, a lot of people have been talking about how the events in Qatar were a catalyst for this deal to take place, the Israeli attack on Qatar, which might be the case, but that's a very recent event, whereas I think the actual negotiations between the two countries to put something like this in place has been going on for years. And my information is that it started 2 years ago. So if you look back 2 years ago, what was going on at the time, that was the start of the Israeli aggression and genocidal attacks on Gaza. So it's taken that long, and in that duration, quite a lot of events have taken place to nudge both countries in that direction. But in direct answer to your question, from what I can assess, I think America is completely on board with this whole situation. Not just America, but also China is on board with the situation, which is why so far we've had no kind of real resistance. Even Iran has come out and said that we welcome this agreement, and we should have a regional defense cooperation. But if USA was not interested, or if this was a surprise for USA, by now the propaganda machine would have kicked in. And also, since the agreement was announced, there's been a number of meetings, cordial meetings between Pakistani military establishment and Trump. So I see no signs that this deal was a surprise or something that goes against the interest of USA.
Okay, Alok, what are your thoughts? It's not a surprise. America, China, Iran, they're all happy for this to go ahead. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it definitely seems like that. And which is actually a surprise, because you'd think that, Saudi Arabia, which has been dependent on the United States of America for its security, is willing to hedge its bets, and the United States of America does not have a problem with it. Maybe they see Pakistan as a sort of a stabilizing factor in the Middle East, in the region. And Pakistan, particularly since after the India-Pakistan conflict, Pakistan has emerged as, sort of a military competitor, as sort of a military power in the region. So it's that, and then of course, while we know for a fact that Pakistani forces had been training the Saudi Arabian troops as well in the past, so they already had a sort of a defensive relationship already in place. It's But now, of course, we know that the main driving force behind this was the attack on Qatar that Israel had planned. So it's surprising that America does not have a problem with this, especially given the fact that 80% of Pakistan's all their defense equipment comes from China. So I agree with Tafhim that yes, America did not have a problem with it. What remains to be seen now is that the Pakistani defense ministers have come out and said, the defense minister has come out and said that this particular sort of agreement is open to other Arab countries as well in the region. So that will be interesting to see as to what we get out of that. There are a lot of talks about how this was done because Pakistan is a nuclear armed country. That plays a factor, yes, but I think Pakistan is, especially since the recent conflict, they've shown that conventionally as well they are a force to be reckoned with.
Right. Ehsan, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, they're saying that it's intriguing, actually. Do you think that Iran and America can both be happy with a deal like this and a pact like this between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan? Does it sound contradictory, or do you agree with this?
Well, your distinguished guest Tafhim touched up on a number of key important things, which I'm not going to really repeat because he already explained it. Instead, I'm going to delve into how it is possible for United States to be happy about this. When we see the way that they phrase this security deal, they say that any attack on either of these countries would be considered as an attack on the other one. Well, if you have the least amount of military knowledge about, how militaries work, you know that this is a completely one-sided pact. The only one that benefits from this is Saudi Arabia. I fail to see how Saudi Arabia, the country that was spending quite a lot of money during its war against Yemen, to the extent that for I think 3 or 4 years, it had the third largest military budget in the world. Yes, larger than the Russian Federation, but failed to basically curtail and stop the Ansar movement inside Yemen. How that country can come to the rescue of Pakistan, a country that has very good air force. It's a nuclear power in terms of having ballistic missiles. They have Shaheen ballistic missile with a range of 2,000 kilometers. So it's a joke, if anyone, not just a joke, but it's an insult if anyone wants to claim that the mighty Saudi Arabian army is going to come to the rescue of the Pakistani military. Well, obviously that's not the right way to phrase this. The correct way to frame this is that Pakistan has now brought Saudi Arabia under its nuclear umbrella, under its nuclear protection. Well, now we have to address what countries actually basically threaten Saudi Arabia. People draw an analogy between what's happened in Qatar and say that it might be something that happens to Saudi Arabia. No, I'm not really sure about that. On the list of the countries that Israel might attack, Saudi Arabia is virtually at the bottom, just missing the top, missing the unlikeliest place to United Arab Emirates, because United Arab Emirates just recently deployed an ELM radar, an Israeli radar, in southern parts of the country in order to spy on the Yemeni resistance group. So Saudi Arabia just barely misses that point. And in fact, the only threat that is posed to Saudi Arabia is the axis of resistance, which might decide that it needs to disrupt the oil market in order to stop United States. But that's unfortunately something that we don't see geopolitical analysts really talk about. So if there would be an attack on Aramco in order to stop the Saudi Arabian air defense system, for example, which is being used in order to intercept Iranian Iranian ballistic missiles or the Yemeni ballistic missiles, but is completely absent when an attack is carried out by Israel on the Iranian territories, when an attack is carried out by Israeli Air Force on Qatari territories. I just failed to see how this is something that Iran and in general the axis of resistance should be happy. I think that these are formalities, and this is not a good development for the resistance in general.
Right. So it seems you disagree somewhat with regards to Iran being as happy as the USA with this pact.
No, I think that the unfortunately, I have a saying. I say that Iran, contrary to what people believe, is actually being run by, unfortunately, diplomats. While the other side, when you look at Israel's history, you see even the founder of Israel, the first prime minister of the fake entity was Ben Gurion, who participated and who was in Haganah terrorist organization, which created the core of the ITF, Israeli terrorist force. So when you look at every prime minister, all of these ministers, or even the people who go and establish their own parties inside the Israeli political apparatus, they have a military history. So we're seeing military commanders fighting against diplomats, and in that sense, you see something like the Beijing agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia being signed, which is possibly one of the most, apologies for framing it this way, stupidest things that I've ever seen in my entire life. It didn't benefit Iran at all, but it provided the leeway with for Saudi Arabia to continue doing what it does.
Sure, but sorry, we have a lot of questions, but I just want to press you on this point here. With regards to you're saying that Saudi Arabia is going to be threatened by the axis of resistance, yes, which is led by Iran, more or less.
I'm not. I have a very big disagreement with the military apparatus inside Iran, with the political decision makers inside Iran. I'm merely saying that there might be a time when there is a necessity to disrupt the oil market, because, if you pay attention to the end of the second imposed war, what the Westerners call as 12-day war, we call the second imposed war in Iran. One of the key factors that made Trump to go into this panic mode was the fact that the oil market started reacting to the news of closure of the Strait of Hormuz, or Iran using bigger and bigger, missiles with bigger warheads. So I think that there might be a time which it would be necessary for Iran to address all these countries that virtually shield the Israeli regime from being punished and castigated by the axis of resistance.
Sure. Okay. Tafhim, over to you with regards to Pakistan's policy. On the one hand, it's praising Donald Trump and is saying that he's a candidate for a Nobel Peace Prize. At the same time, it is protecting, or it is backing Iran against Israel. Is there a contradiction here, or is this a coherent strategy? How do you see this?
I think from a Pakistani point of view, it is somewhat a coherent strategy. And the reason is, as a policy, Pakistan has historically played a role of a bridge between China and USA. Pakistan was the bridge through which USA could reach out to China and form an alliance, or at least bring China into the world community in the 70s. And Pakistan is really wanting to and keen to play that kind of a role again. I think one of the things at the moment, which is causing a lot of Pakistanis to pinch themselves to see if this is all real, is that it seems like Pakistan at the moment is really the only country in the world that has strategic relations with all three superpowers. That's China, USA, and Russia. So in that regards, I think the policy is coherent, but also obviously Pakistan then has its own sensitivities as well. So I talk about this when Iran was about to be attacked by Israel in June. Just before that, Pakistan and India went to war in May for 4 days. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, and I think a lot of world community kind of agreed with Pakistan's stance that Pakistan came out on top. As a result of that, Pakistan's profile went up exponentially, really. And that's when Trump invited Pakistan's chief of army staff to the White House, which was, I think, the first time ever that a foreign chief of army staff had been invited to a serving chief of army staff had been invited to the White House. And that was in the context when the war was about to start between Israel and Iran. And I remember listening to Pakistan's defense minister, Khwaja Asif's interview at that time. And someone was asking him that these are very tricky and difficult times for us in that we've just won this war against India. We've strengthened our relations with America. Um, Israel is about to go to war with Iran. And do you see difficulties in this situation in that USA is going to have expectations from Pakistan that Pakistan will put Pakistan in a very tricky situation? And I think Khwaja Asif's reply was really interesting. His response was that I agree, Pakistan is in a tricky situation and I do have concerns, but he was saying that my concerns are not the same as your concerns. I am not concerned with what America needs right now. I'm concerned that our brotherly nation next door to us, who we have historic ties with, we once were Persian speaking people ourselves, so we had that linguistic link with Iran as well. And of course, we have a religious tie. We share borders. And he was saying that Iran is about to be attacked unjustly by aggressive Israel. And my concern is how we can support Iran to the best of our ability. And basically, they went out and did that. And as a result, the Iranian parliament came out with those chants of "Thank you, Pakistan." So I think somehow Pakistan so far has balanced all of those different equations pretty well. What's happened recently as well, and maybe you might talk about that later on, is that Trump has now suddenly also announced that he wants Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan back. And for that, obviously, he needs Pakistan's help as well. And I don't think Pakistan is going to offer that help. So there are those red lines where Pakistan refuses to go beyond. But the relationship between Pakistan and USA is spans over decades. And I don't think there's been any kinetic operations from America in and around the region that America's gone into the operations without Pakistan. I think USA has that kind of a trust that Pakistani army. I mean, for good or for bad, that can be seen either way. But USA has that trust that Pakistan has an ability to shape um, the the region around itself. So yeah, so basically yes. In answer to your question, I think um, it's not so contradictory as it first might appear because every nation has um, competing interest and layers of interest. So it's just how you manage those all.
Ehsan, do you agree with that Pakistan is playing multiple fronts, having a coherent strategy, doing so?
I mean, I do think that it is, in certain ways, when people talk about it, it's childish to think that countries should basically uh, dedicate their complete loyalty and fealty to a certain country. I mean, there's a definition for that, and that's a vassal state. Obviously, a superpower, a nuclear power like Pakistan is not a country that doesn't have its own political establishment, and like they might have opposing interests. They might have an interest to, basically stay on the good grace of United States, and Saudi Arabia is like the perfect medium for that, because it's basically I'm referring to Pakistan, can receive uh, economic aid from Saudi Arabia. It is a place that if you say that you're gonna basically protect Saudi Arabia, well, the Americans and the Israelis would basically interpret it, even if that's not your case, that's not your intention. They're going to interpret it that it would make it harder for the axis of resistance to carry out an attack similar to what we saw on Aramco update. And then China, basically, because of the fact that it seeks to expand upon and sort of diversify its energy resources, and doesn't want to be tied to any single country, basically, also China would be pleased with you. So Pakistan is basically killing three birds with one stone, because Iran also signed like the agreement with the Saudi Arabian officials in Beijing. So they can just easily return to the Iranian side and say, well, you guys signed an agreement. What do you expect of us? You expect us to not go and sign a security pact with Saudi Arabia? So I think that actually, from international relations perspective, Pakistan is playing it smart.
Right, great. Alok, just after the signing of the pact, there was a lot of propagation of propaganda and disinformation. For example, 25,000 Pakistani troops being sent to Yemen. Recycled videos of UN peacekeepers spread immediately after the signing of the pact. What do you make of that? Who would benefit from spreading such misinformation?
I know, where was this misinformation coming from India? Because we are
on social media, I would assume.
we are sort of no. So Indians did not take very kindly to this deal. I honestly don't think it does not affect us that much, as long as we're not willing to be the aggressors. And India itself has a very good relationship with Saudi Arabia. There's bilateral trade of more than $40 billion, whereas between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, it's about $5 billion. So a lot of the analysis here has been sort of mixed. They've been sort of saying that, that it's, it's very much possible that some of the fake news that you're saying was spread from India. India is number one in spreading misinformation and disinformation. The world is well aware of that as well. So coming back, I'd just like to add one point that Ehsan had
Sure,
said,
go ahead.
that it's not that there's nothing in it for Pakistan. So they get, as you very well pointed out, they get economic aid. And the current economic situation is such that they require this sort of aid. And if anything, when you look at Pakistan, which country would attack Pakistan? It's if you talk to anyone who's from Pakistan, they would tell you, yeah, that the immediate threat is from India. So, and India has had a stance that, Operation Sindoor is not over, and any sort of terrorist attack would be, replied for using our armed forces, which is basically what happened during the armed conflict between the two countries in May.
Is it still that in Pakistan? Do you think that they will still say India, given that straight after the initiation of the 12-day war imposed on Iran, Netanyahu came out and said, look, next is going to be, he was expecting Iran to fall, next is going to be Pakistan?
I think he can say what he wants. I think he already has his hands full. I think the last thing they would want is, going all the way to Pakistan to attack. The talks in Pakistan are, which are not relevant at all, is that, Israel will team up with India. I don't think anything of that sort benefits India at all. If India wants to attack for whatever reason, justified, unjustified, they'd go ahead and do it themselves. And they'd probably have to think like 3-4 times more now. Because for one, you already know that China has Pakistan's back, which was a big reason for the success in during the Operation Sindoor. And you also know that now, so no countries came and backed India against Pakistan, whereas Pakistan was backed by China, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and now you also have Saudi Arabia as an added element. So this is what it gives to Pakistan. I think it also puts them up sort of, geopolitically, it gives them sort of a higher status now. And they can tell the other countries as well, as they have been saying, that, listen, this sort of agreement is open to all, that, we can have this sort of agreement, and they can sort of get certain loans, etc., that they probably need to stimulate the economy.
Sure. Tafhim, do you want
And
to
regarding the misinformation, disinformation, there's been a lot of stuff going around relating to that, but I don't think there have been any actionable measures so far. That except for maybe you may see that there's more sort of training that Pakistan trains more of sort of the Saudi Arabian troops, that may happen, some more joint exercises, etc., that may happen as well. And I think it's sort of plain in sight now that the Americans are well in line with, because they have had so much communication with the Pakistani leadership of late.
Right.
Trump himself has had so many meetings with the Pakistani leadership, and they're sort of playing their cards right, I guess.
Right. Tafhim, did you want to add
Yeah.
anything with regards to
Yes,
these topics? There were actually two topics that are open. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. Sorry, did you ask me?
Yeah, Tafhim, if you can, two topics that came
Yes.
up with regards to the propaganda, the misinformation, and then what Alok was saying with regards to the benefits to Pakistan from the Pact.
Propaganda, yes, there is a lot of propaganda coming out. Who knows where it's coming out from? But just before this episode, I was actually looking online because there was some statement apparently that came through Netanyahu about Pakistan's nuclear program and threatening that. And I saw that like a month ago or something, and I was just looking that up again, and it turns out now it's been verified as a scam. It's something that came up in 2011 in the context of the Afghanistan war. So all of these things, I think it is important to filter out the right from the wrong, and it takes time. But what I would like to add is a few things. So a lot of people looking at this agreement are saying that this agreement is Saudi Arabia specific. Whereas a lot of other people seeing it from a South Asian lens are saying this is Pakistan specific. And I don't think an agreement like this can be specific to one country. At the end of the day, it's a mutual defense agreement, which means both nations have to, by the terms of it, they have to come to the defense of the other. Now, how do they defend the other is a different question, because like Ehsan was saying, Pakistan is a strong military power, but then Pakistan has economic problems. And on the other hand, Saudi Arabia is a strong economic power, but then it has a very weak army. So if Pakistan did, for example, end up in a conflict with India, the last thing really Pakistan would need or want is for Saudi troops to be on Pakistan side by side, because that would just slow things down for Pakistan. Pakistan is well capable of um, taking on India in a conventional war or nuclear war, whatever it might be. But where Pakistan falls short, and this is before the war in May, the 4-day war between India and Pakistan, this is what I was listening to Indian analysts as well, because a lot of the analysts were realizing that Pakistan, in a short war, Pakistan can take on India. But as the war goes, it goes longer, Pakistan is going to start struggling economically because Pakistan won't have enough oil or enough resources to sustain that war. And I think that's where Saudi Arabia comes in. So it's not like for like support, but it's definitely the support is there. I've also heard a lot of Indian analysts say that this agreement is not going to affect India. Well, it's not going to affect India if India doesn't have a war with Pakistan. But when it does, or if it does, then it definitely will affect whoever it might be, because the agreement doesn't rule out certain countries and say that this agreement is only for X, Y, and Z. So whichever country it might be is going to get affected. And then the other thing I wanted to just add is, from an American point of view, going back to your first question, I think there are a number of things. Firstly, America is looking um, to shed some of the weight that it has on its shoulders in terms of defense and security of other countries, whether that's in the Middle East or Europe and all of that. And Trump is looking for a more transactional kind of a relationship. So when you do shed that kind of security support that you're offering to others, obviously those countries will have to go and look elsewhere. And that's why I think from an American point of view, Pakistan was a good option for America, because If, for example, Saudi Arabia went straight to China and said, would you have a defense deal with us? Not that China would agree, because China just does not operate that way. But if it did, then that would not sit well with America. So for America, for Trump especially, it suits him really well that Saudi Arabia has gone into this agreement with Pakistan, which also then means that from Saudi economic support, Pakistan will be able to purchase more and more weapons from America, maybe as well. So I think it works for everyone. For me, the last
So
thing I would say
if
on
I was
this,
to ask you in one word, what is the primary purpose of this pact? What would you say?
I think the primary purpose is two. There's two, as I see it, there's two things. One is the attack on Qatar that came from Israel. I think that has made it clear to America. It's not just made it clear to the nations in the Middle East that they can't rely on America for their defense, but it's actually made it pretty clear to America as well that they cannot control Israel, and Israel will just run amok, and it will sabotage USA interests in the region.
Right.
And just with that, I don't think Trump administration or even the Biden administration before that, or whoever comes after Trump, no one has that ability in USA to take on Israel as it is right now. And I think the only thing that they could have done is they could have empowered other countries in the region to balance things out a little bit. And I think that gave them a perfect opportunity for this, because there was no one else who would have been more suitable to have this agreement with. So that's one thing. And obviously the other thing is, as I mentioned, it shed some responsibility off USA and it frees them up a little bit. The last thing I would say is, for me, this agreement, for it to be successful, for me, I think the test is, and this is going to take some time, but the test is for Iran to be included in the pact at some stage. I think if that happens, that's when things will really turn around in the Middle East, because then we will go beyond the Shia-Sunni split that especially the Arab nations have been trying to play upon. I mean, I am a Sunni myself, but I think the Sunni states in the region have really pushed that card a bit too far. And I think having Iran in the pact is going to be the actual test of the agreement.
Okay. Ehsan, what are your thoughts about the primary purpose? If we were to say, in one word, what is the primary purpose of this pact? What would you say? One answer was to deter Israel. Anything to do with Yemen, in your opinion?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think that this pact would deter Israel.
No.
Israel does have very little incentives in order to carry out an attack on Saudi Arabia. Let's compare to Saudi Arabia with Qatar, because people tend to bring up the Qatar strike. Qatar, I'm not fond of Qatar. Qatar has Al Jazeera, which pushed sectarian divide in the region to hell and back. They are responsible for the collapse of Syria, which played an integral role in enabling Israelis to carry out an attack on Iran, because of the fact that, yes, Syrian air defense system was incapable of basically intercepting stealth fighters of Israel, or even F-16s and such fighter jets, but it could shoot down the fuel tankers that were used in order to refuel, the tanks of these fighter jets. So the loss of Syria was important. I even saw Giuliani forces brag about intercepting the Iranian drones when they were on their way to Israel. And now we also see, Ahmad al-Shar'a, so-called Ahmad al-Shar'a, Abu Muhammad Giuliani, meeting with the president of World Jewish Congress, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm saying the name correctly. And he says that, the president said that they are discussing the basically normalizations of ties. So Qatar played that role. I'm not going to defend Qatar, but Al Jazeera, in the case of Palestine, has made it uncomfortable for the Israeli regime. It is one of the pillars that has brought awareness to the people around the world. We shouldn't get emotional and deny facts. So they have that. What did Saudi Arabia have? Saudi Arabia had Iran International. Iran International played a very integral role in stirring up riots inside Iran in 2022 and created a lot of problem. People actually thought, I mean, I'm referring to the Western intelligence, they thought that Iran is going to collapse. Unfortunately, comments made by former foreign minister of Pakistan, where he actually supported and endorsed those riots, they didn't help. But Saudi Arabia was actually flaming, basically throwing gasoline on fire, and in many cases, uh, putting out the most egregious lies. Now, the Iran International's ownership, to a certain extent, has been it's kind. I still think that it's sort of like a joint operation, but their headquarter. I forgot the name of the anchor, but when he talks, he starts his program. He says that I'm coming to you. You're watching us from Tel Aviv. So there is a stark difference between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Qatar also supported Ikhwan al-Muslimin, and you can say whatever you want about Ikhwan al-Muslimin. We can discuss that. We can go into length as what Ikhwan al-Muslimin does, all different branches and things of that nature. But there's a stark difference between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So an attack on Saudi Arabia isn't likely. The cooperation and the basically try the attempts to work in working together in conjunction with Saudi Arabia in Israel goes back to the 60s, So when you take all these factors into consideration, I fail to see how this pact actually basically benefits the so-called Ummah, because now I do not have really any definition. The only humanitarian aid program that is being basically run, it's by a bunch of Westerners in the form of Samud, global Samud flotilla, which I think it's a shame. It's a stain on the honor of the Muslims that they have failed to do anything, to the extent that the Westerners are coming to the rescue of the Muslims in Palestine. Where is that brotherhood? So I think that, we can get caught up in the propaganda and the jargon and the cliche, but I think that it is very clear as to what is happening here.
All right, just back to the question though, the primary purpose of this pact, you've broken down why you don't think it's anything to do with, similarities with Qatar or an attack from Israel. What do you think the primary purpose is?
For Saudi Arabia, it's a security guarantee against basically rogue drones that will come out of nowhere, that they're coming from Ansar. And from Pakistani side, it's economic benefits.
Okay, we'll get to the economic benefits in a minute. Alok, do you want to add anything to that question with regards to the primary purpose of this pact? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think they basically had all their eggs in one basket, which was that America will provide security. This at least, I think, lays out sort of a bit of a foundation that, these the countries in the region, they can have a sort of a defensive pact themselves as well. And they can sort of look after their own security, the entire region. So I think it sort of paves way for that more than anything else. So it would be interesting to see if Pakistan or any other countries sort of, come up with similar sort of pacts themselves. There was a lot of talks about it when all of these countries sort of got together. Now let's see if they're able to put anything on paper or get some actions in place.
Okay, Tafhim.
Amir, can I just add one thing?
Yeah, go for it.
So I completely agree. I don't think Saudi Arabia is in any direct threat of being attacked by Israel, but that doesn't mean that they don't need security in case that happens. So they definitely require that security. But I think what's happened in Qatar was one thing, but I think before that, what happened in 2019 when Ansar attacked the oil fields in Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia was expecting USA to do something, and USA did nothing at all, to the point where they had to go and compromise and kind of come to peace with. And I think that was a big shock to Saudi Arabia. Not that if Pakistan was in that place, Pakistan would have done something, because I think that was quite a complicated set of events, and Pakistan in the past has tried its best not to get involved in internal conflicts of countries in the Middle East, like Muslim countries in the Middle East. So Pakistan was asked by Saudi Arabia in 2015 to join the campaign against Yemen, and they basically refused, and that caused lots of problems. So I think obviously the defense needs to emphasize that this is a defense agreement, it's not an aggression agreement. But anyway, so that was one major event, I think. And then the second one obviously was the Qatar event that then reminded the countries that USA is not going to be there necessarily if you do need support. Whereas when Yemen attacked Israel, America jumped in and started attacking Yemen. Not that they could achieve anything, but at least they tried. With Saudi Arabia, there was nothing. So those were the two big events, I think. And obviously then the third event that we've talked about was the war between India and Pakistan, where they saw that Pakistan in a conventional war was able to ward off the attacks from India and give India a bloody nose. So I think all of those kind of acts together were a catalyst for where we are today.
Okay, Alok, I know you're going to have to go very soon. Your time is running out. I just want to ask you one question before you go. With regards to Saudi Arabia being a major sort of energy and investment partner, how worried will India be with regards to a pact like this between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia? Will it affect initiatives like the IMEC?
No, I don't. I don't think so. India really needs to be worried. In terms of optics, it looks bad. And if the current government is worried about optics, it does look bad because it sort of raises Pakistan's stature. Whereas I think one of the few responsibilities, one of the only responsibilities that our foreign minister was given was to isolate Pakistan. Whereas what's happening is quite the opposite. So I think in those sort of symbolic terms, yes, it does. It does not look so great for India. However, having said that, what I said earlier was that India has a huge purchasing power, and they're a big buyer of energy from Saudi Arabia. They have $40 billion worth of trade that they do bilaterally. There's a huge Indian population that actually works in Saudi Arabia. So from an optics perspective, yes, it doesn't look that great. But from when push comes to shove, then I think if they want to sort of carry out another operation, as they said, which is what they've been saying, that if there is another terrorist attack like that, which they claim was from Pakistan, then they'd want to retaliate in the similar manner. That is when now they have to do even more thinking.
Sure.
So yeah, from that perspective, yes. But otherwise, I don't think India is gonna change their relationship with Saudi Arabia. There's been no gesture or there's been no statement like that at all from the Indian government. In fact, the only statement that has been is that, yeah, we have been aware of it and they have been talking about it for a while. So I don't think they're sort of looking at. I don't think it will affect the relationship between India and Saudi Arabia.
Let's keep the peace. Alok, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I know you have to go for your
Thanks
next.
so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry, I need to cut off. Thanks.
Okay, Ehsan, over to you with regards to the Ummah that you spoke about and how, it's hard to see this Ummah. If Pakistan and Saudi Arabia are signing this pact together and, they're going to defend each other and protect each other and fight for each other, how can they sort of reconcile this rhetoric of a united Ummah if they're going to have to eventually fight their brother Muslims from Yemen, the Ansar Allah, for example?
Well, currently going against Ansar is basically a reputation suicide. I don't think that anyone would tolerate any attack on Ansar because they are virtually the only people who are in direct conflict at the moment. Let's not forget that Hezbollah is now dealing with disarmament and pressures of the government for disarmament, and Iran is basically currently just rebuilding its air defense systems. So I don't think that this would actually happen. The point, that wasn't the point that I was trying to make. Obviously, I don't think that, I think that at the moment, the prospect of seeing an attack by Ansar on Saudi Arabia is very, very negligible, right? That's very low amount of likelihood to see an attack being carried out by on Saudi Arabian infrastructure. But like it doesn't look good at from whichever prism or goggle you look through this. It doesn't look good because you have this genocide that's been going on, and people don't do anything with regards to it. People sign security pacts with one another. It's basic. It seems that at best, this is the best interpretation. Just giving people the benefit of the doubt. At best, you can say that people have said, "Okay, Palestine is already lost. Let's save the other actors in the region." And when you look at the other actors in the region, they are all uh, joining Abraham Accords or like have different pacts with Israel. Sometimes they have covert relationship with a fake entity. So I mean, it doesn't really look good. There
It's
is
a very pessimistic way of looking at it. If that's what they're
Sorry?
going for, that's very pessimistic.
Uh, I don't know. I mean, it's the situation currently at the moment is very hard to decipher because, uh, it- again, I think that Pakistan would be a perfect case study in order to understand what's happening, because you see when you look at Pakistan and the way that it is playing the game of politics, it's basically trying to manage four different players all at once, and they're doing a very good job. But the important thing is not to get caught up in the cliche. I mean, it's not that I'm not a Muslim. It's not the fact that I am not religious. I'm not I'm not secular. But the fact is that uh, when you look at these things, you think that the rhetoric doesn't match the actions. So I mean, look at UAE. UAE is collaborating with Israel. I mean, even in certain extents, more than the European countries. So, I mean, you get me in that question. Where does this leave the Ummah? I think that as much as we like to believe that the Ummah exists, and I don't want to create to do what Al Jazeera does and create sectarian divide, but we have to ask these fundamental questions from ourselves. And I think that if we are being fair, we see that we can hardly explain what's happening from the conscious of the Ummah.
Right. Tafhim, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I very much agree with Ahsan, and I think it is a very pessimistic place to be from an Ummah point of view. On my own channel, I had a number of different episodes talking about the Ummah. Does it actually exist, or is it a fragment of our imagination at this point? And I invited some scholars, John Esposito, Mark Juergensmeyer, and they were very offended by me even asking the question, does the Ummah exist? Because they're saying absolutely not. And it's hard to
Saying
argue.
absolutely not. It doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist, no.
Wow.
So you should listen to those episodes.
That
I
is
tried
really
not to argue
pessimistic.
with them, but I think they basically overcame me.
Okay.
But so from a real political point of view, I think it is at the moment the situation that every state is just interested in self-preservation and self-interest. And in that, because the Palestinians are not a state at this stage, or at least for a lot of people, for states like people like Pakistan, we don't recognize Israel at all to be a state, and we recognize all of that area to be Palestine. But recognizing it is one thing, and actually on the ground being in control is a different thing. And because they don't have any control or influence, it makes it very difficult for, in real politic terms, for states to come out and proactively provide any assistance, which is why it seems like they've just completely given up on the cause, if they ever had the cause to heart. I saw your recent episode with Scott Ritter, where he was saying that all the Arab countries, apart from Yemen, have given up on Palestine, and no one. The fact is that no one's willing to die for Palestine. Well, I was watching that and I was thinking, well, the problem is that in the Arab states, it's not just that no one's willing to die for Palestine. They're not willing to die for themselves, for their own nations, or for their own states, which is why they're outsourcing their security left, right, and center. So when we come to that kind of a place, and it's clear in the Quran that when we get to a stage where we love the life of this world more than the hereafter, then we will be disgraced, and that's what's happening at the moment, unfortunately. One other thing is that it's quite interesting to note as well that as soon as the agreement was announced between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, on that same day, a Pakistani ship was attacked just off the coast of Yemen by Israeli drones. And that's actually the first time in maybe a decade that Israel's launched an attack of any kind directly on Pakistan. So maybe that's some sign of things to come. We'll see.
Interesting times indeed. Ehsan, back over to you with regards to Tehran and the relationship that it sees with regards to the pact, the Saudi Arabia and Pakistan pact. If the Yemen truce collapses, how will Tehran reconcile this issue of, supporting Ansar and reconciliation with Saudi Arabia, given the fact that Tehran is trying to form this or forge this relationship and make it stronger between Tehran and Riyadh?
Oh well, I'm Iranian. I have been living in this country all my life. But if I'm being honest, I don't understand what the Iranian government does. Like, let's be plain and simple about that. Very clearly, I can't really decipher what they do. In order to understand what an actor does, you need to use certain methods in order to decipher their actions. You have to first understand their ideology, their framework of thinking. And when I start looking at the decisions taken by, the current Iranian government, I fail to understand what their goal is, because on one hand you have the Iranian military establishment paying a hefty price for its support of Palestine. People who know about the details of what happens on the ground in Palestine know the absolutely important role that the Iranian general known as Haj Razvan, that was his nom de guerre, played General Assad. His real name was General Assadi. Played in helping Hamas. He basically at one time basically rebuilt Hamas from the ground up. So on one hand, you have these military generals who go and make all those sacrifices. General Neil Furush was assassinated alongside the Hezbollah leader Sayyid Hassan Nasr. You had General, I forgot his name, unfortunately, but you had the general who was assassinated in Syria. He was the commander of fronts in both Syria and Lebanon against the Israeli occupation forces. So on one hand, you see this, and you see that during the 12-day wars, the bulk of I can say the bulk of it, the bulk of people who were assassinated were the Iranian military generals. On the other hand, you have the Iranian, again, diplomats who go to ridiculous extents to reach some sort of deal with United States. For example, I'll give you an example. Mr. Larijani, the Secretary General of Supreme National Security Council in Iran, recently had a post on his Twitter, and he said, well, we talked to France, and they promised that if we go and sign a deal with the IAEA, they're gonna refrain from activating the snapback, or at least they're gonna renew it. I don't remember the exact phrasing that was used in the tweet, but when you look at the comments that were underneath it, people were mocking this. So how can you have this discrepancy between two fractions of your society? It's absolutely mind-boggling how on one level Iranian government behaves like this, but on the other level you have the culture of martyrdom and all those kind of values and virtues of fighting against imperialism, helping the oppressed. It's mind-boggling what is happening inside Iran.
Right, but is it those, obviously those who were assassinated during the 12-day war, they were not all generals. There were a lot of men, women, and children who were completely innocent. There were doctors, nuclear scientists who were targeted. They have nothing to do with the weaponization of the nuclear system. They were working in the medical system altogether. But with regards to that, I would like to understand something. These generals, are they working for the are they part of the military of the government, or are they part of the IRGC?
Look, let's go to the extreme version,
Okay.
right? Because I'm sick and tired of explaining to people at first that Iran is a democracy, and in a democratic structure, you have different parts of this machine that is like democratic. The cogs have to work well together, and they can't go in the opposite direction. But since I have given up on explaining that to people because they actively subscribe to the ridiculous propaganda that is being disseminated by the Western propaganda machine, let's think of Iran as an absolute monarchy. Okay, you can't sink lower than this level.
Okay.
Let's say that Ayatollah Khamenei, he is absolutely not this. But let's think of the Ayatollah in Iran as a king. You can't get any worse than this.
Can we? Let's make it even worse. Can we make him a dictator?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's make him a dictator. Go for it.
You have this guy. He lines up his governmental officials, and they're all working behind him, underneath him, and they have to listen to him. He goes and he wants to get a report because, I mean, it's very clear that one single man cannot really make all the decisions. He goes to the economic minister. He says, "How are we doing economically?" The economic minister or whatever, vizier or whatever, comes to him and says, "Oh, we're doing awful. Everything is bad. We don't have money. We can't feed our people." He goes to the interior minister, right? The person who is in charge of, basically building the roads or things of that nature. And he says, "Well, how are the infrastructure inside Iran?" And that minister goes and says, "Well, the infrastructure is horrible, and since we don't have money, as was stated by the economic minister, if we get attacked, it will take us decades in order to rebuild our infrastructure, and our infrastructure is already crumbling." You go to the next vizier, next minister, and so on and so forth. So when you have a reformist government in charge of Iran, the military, whose budget is actually determined by the Office of Budget and Management, which acts underneath the Office of Presidency. Yes, the Iranian president doesn't control the Iranian military, but it controls how much money they receive. And if you know about the internal news inside Iran, the local news inside Iran, you know that at one point during the Rouhani administration, they actively refuse to pay the salaries of, for example, the Iranian network TVs, because they were saying things that weren't really go along with this initiative that the Rouhani government had, which was JCPOA. So they say that the sort of like the Ayatollah controls the TV network, but then you have the employees of that institution not receiving their salary. And it's not like IRIB is a kind of business that has like a large revenue and it has lots of income. They're completely dependent on the state and the office of the presidency, which at the time was saying, "Oh no, we have no money in order to fund that." It becomes even worse when you understand the reality, which Iran is actually a democratic political has a democratic political structure, and you have something like Supreme National Security Council, the head of which is the Iranian president. So the Iranian president, and then when you see the makeup of the Iranian Supreme National Security Council inside Iran, there is the foreign minister who has a seat there, and has a vote. You have the Minister of Intelligence and Security. You have the head of the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, who is in a sort of coalition, in a way, unofficial coalition with the Iranian president. You have the Minister of Interior Affairs, who is also determined by the Iranian president. And you see, then these people are in charge of voting on security issues of the country. And what happens is that when something is put into a vote, yes, the Iranian military generals might have a different opinion, but what ends up happening is that you have to negotiate, which is exactly what General Haji said before his martyrdom in an interview in a program called Safa Awwal, which can be translated to first row. He said that we had to negotiate, we had to bargain. The term that he used was chanazani, which is bargain. We had to bargain for launching 200 missiles on the Israeli fake entity. Who did he have to negotiate with? Who did he have to bargain with?
With the current government.
I mean, I'm not going to say it outright, but we can think of certain people who didn't really support that policy.
Right. Okay, very interesting indeed. Over to you with regards to Israel. Does Israel see this as a threat, the pact between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia? Tafhim, is this a threat to them, or do they see it as a shift in the regional powers, or is it a non-event to them? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think Israel doesn't necessarily see it as a threat to them, as an immediate threat to them, but I think it definitely is an immediate concern to them, and it might actually turn into a threat depending on where this goes. And I think everyone's right now just sitting and watching why this, which is why there's been no real statements pro or against it either from USA or from Israel, because I think they're just waiting and watching. I think also this whole question that came up about whether Pakistan will provide now a nuclear umbrella to Saudi Arabia, I think that's a big concern for Israel, obviously. And personally speaking, I think that's a non-issue. I don't think Pakistan has that ability to provide a nuclear umbrella to Saudi Arabia. And I think the defense minister of Pakistan misspoke and then tried to retreat that statement. But Israel's always concerned when it doesn't really matter if Israel has any intention to attack Saudi Arabia now or in the future. Israel just cannot tolerate anyone who might be able to challenge Israel's domination in the region. Israel is completely playing a zero-sum game. There was a time when apparently, so in 1981, Israel attacked Iraq and destroyed their nuclear program. And in about 1983, 1984, Israel had a proactive plan to attack Pakistan's nuclear installations, nuclear enrichment facilities in a place called Kahuta in Pakistan. And it turned out that it's too difficult for them to launch that attack from the distance where they are sitting. So they wanted to do that alongside India. So both countries were going to plan to launch an Israeli attack from Indian air bases. At the time, Pakistan got wind of that. USA also informed Pakistan. Pakistan gave immediate threats back to India, and Israel informed them that we know what you're doing. And there's going to be an immediate and a severe response if you try anything like that. So at that time, they stopped. But Israel is a crazy nation. You just never know what they're going to do next. I think the proof of the pudding also will be how this pact, this agreement develops. Obviously, at the moment, it's an agreement. It might turn to a pact. It might turn into a treaty. And it might include other countries in the region. I've heard that there's at least 2 countries, I think it's UAE and Qatar, who are already interested in joining. So that's going to pose challenges for Pakistan and Saudi Arabia to manage that bigger agreement, but it's definitely going to cause challenges for Israel. And once again, I'll go back to my actual point that for me, the proof of this agreement is going to be if Iran can join, or Iran is allowed to join by USA,
Do you
for
think
example.
Iran would join if invited? I mean,
I think definitely if allowed, they would definitely join, because it would be, they've already stated that they're looking for a regional security structure. And if they can join, that would further weaken America's involvement, security arrangement in the region. It would reduce the necessity to have someone like USA overseeing everything.
right.
And it would definitely weaken Israel. And because of that, I can't see how those two countries will allow Iran to join. But I think if the opportunity was there, I think Iran would definitely join.
All right, Ehsan, in the hypothetical situation, so I have two questions for you here, intertwined. How do you see Israel seeing this pact between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia? And if, in the hypothetical situation that Iran was invited to join this pact, do you think Iran would join, or will it depend whether, the reformists are in government or the conservatives are in government? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that I've already explained it from the Israeli perspective when I said that it would make an attack by Ansar to curb the ambitions of Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman to be wary of his actions. When I said that this pact can sort of achieve that, because again, it makes it complicated for all the sides. It's not just it would be harder for Pakistan to decide what it's going to do between the Muslim countries, but to the best of my knowledge, the pact doesn't exclude attacks that come from different countries. It's inclusive. Any attack by any country will will be considered as an attack on the other country's sovereignty. So through that prism, I think that the main loser here is the axis of resistance. So from that perspective, I think that the Israelis can now rest assured that not the Israelis. It's more about the United States interest. People, the policymakers in the United States, and more specifically, the J.D. Vance branch of the Trump administration, they can now be rest assured that attacks such as what we saw in, I believe it was 2018, I forgot, but I think that those attacks are now less likely to happen from Yemen and so. From the other perspective, look, I do believe that sometimes taking a path and adopting a certain policy, even if it's not the best policy, if you commit to that policy, it's better than having no policy at all. It's like going down a route, and then you decide to come back, return to the starting point and start another route. Basically, you have wasted a lot of time, and this can complicate things. It has psychological effects. It has problem with resource management, everything on every level. Now that the Iranian side has decided to go down a route that I don't really actually support, I don't think that we should have ever signed the Beijing agreement with Saudi Arabia in China, despite the fact that I actually tried to not be really controversial. And if you go and see my interviews on, I think it was Al Arabi 24, I actually said positive things about it. So I tried to went along with this, despite the fact that it wasn't my intention. But I think that given the opportunity, yes, absolutely. At least it would be a consistent policy that Iran would, commit to. Whereas, like the current situation, when we see that, I mean, there's a lot of confusion as to what is it that actually the Iranian government wants to do. So I would think that that's a good thing if Iran joins, given the opportunity that Iran would join. But I'll say another thing as well. I don't think that this pact would become bigger than this. I think that if UAE ever decides to sign a security pact with another country, it would be with Turkey. And there's a reason as to why I'm saying this. It's not just prediction for the sake of flexing or something, because it is actually very tricky. I don't have a a sort of all-seeing globe in front of me to look into the future. So this is actually a little bit tricky. But the reason that I'm saying it is because if I'm right in my analysis that United States and Israel are actually welcoming such developments, then the next thing would be prevention of pacts like this becoming more inclusive, and then creating a rival organization in which they would be able to create again another form of rivalry between the countries of region.
Right, interesting. Would it be entrapment? I mean, it sounds like if I'm kind of confused here a little bit because at one point you were saying they should join because that would be consistent, but at another point you were saying they shouldn't join because it's not the right thing to do. Is that right? You don't think they should join, but it would be consistent of them to join.
Look, I'll explain to you. So I have my own opinion, which is obviously different to that of the political and military establishment of Iran. I'll give you an example. General Aziz Jah said that this is a rubbish idea that Israel, after being done with Hezbollah, come at Iran. That was my opinion. And on the hindsight, I was proven to be right. But they're not going to listen to people like me. They're not. It's the reality. But the second best thing would be to actually commit to something, right? So this is not my first choice, but this is something that I can acquiesce to. So that's that. You can
sorry, surely committing to something that is not on the right path and sticking to that wrong path is not a good way to approach things.
No. It's not an optimum path. Now there are ways and wiggle room, and there are cards that Iran actually can play in that path, in that form of decision making. Iran can utilize different tools at its disposal in order to change the trajectory of these pacts. So that's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
But on the other side, when I was talking about UAE and Turkey, I was referring to the fact that UAE has a very strong presence in Azerbaijan, for example, and they're basically doing the infrastructure in that region. So there is actually an evidence. I'm not coming up with like Jules Verne type of situations completely out of fiction. There is underground evidence as to why we see that happening. It's not a pure speculation based on fantasy or something like that.
Interesting. Tafhim, let's talk about Kashmir.
Yeah, with Kashmir is one of those issues that, along with Palestine, has been going on for the last 6 decades or 7 decades now. And it's very depressing to see what's going on there. I mean, recently, well, not recently, I think it was 2019 when India formally merged Kashmir into Indian state, meaning before that, Kashmir had a special status, which meant that, for example, people from outside of Kashmir couldn't come and buy land in Kashmir to protect Kashmiri identity. And they had a lot of other privileges. They could make their own rules and they can govern themselves within the state of India. So all of that was taken away and the state was merged. And it seemed like this is going to be an impossible situation now to bring all of that back, and Kashmiri cause is going to be now in a very difficult place. That's how it appeared, but in reality, what it did was it brought Pakistan and China even closer together.
Right.
I mean, both of those countries have had really strong, what they call ironclad relationships for decades now. But that one move by India, I think, was very counterproductive for Indians themselves, because China also has borders joining Kashmir and has claim over some of that land. So this is like a 3-state dispute, and it's brought China and Pakistan closer together. It's also meant that recently China has officially now all the regions that are joining China and India, China has given them new names. So as far as China is concerned, they all belong to China. So with these things in mind, I think that's kind of partly also why this was the war in May between India and Pakistan Both these countries have had many wars before, and China has been friends of Pakistan for many decades now. But never before has China come out so openly in support of Pakistan, where openly declared that we will not allow Pakistani sovereignty to be compromised. And secondly, they openly gave weapons to Pakistan.
So I guess the
That's
question here is with regards to this Pakistan, Saudi Arabia pact, is that going to push India sort of into a corner where it's going to be forced to do something else like it did in 2019?
Yes, it could. It could. And one of the things that people are talking about, because for example, in the war in May between India and Pakistan, the only country that was supporting India was Israel. Other than that, they were being supported by the Taliban regime, which is a regime that India itself doesn't recognize as Afghanistan's true representative. So the only country supporting India was Israel. And then when we had the war between Israel and Iran, India tried to be neutral rather than go out and be in support of Iran. And so with that in mind, I think it's quite easy to see if India had like a knee-jerk reaction, they could then have a more formal agreement with Israel, which would bring them closer to America, which is India's now strategic partner. So it could push them in a corner to do that, but I think that would be very counterproductive in a way that it would alienate India in the whole Middle East region, where India has lots of economic interest. And I think with India, I think one of the problems for them is that they find themselves in a situation where their economic interests are now conflicting with their strategic interests. So whether that's in Iran, where the war in Iran, they went economically, their interest was to support Iran, but strategically, their interest was to support Israel. And now the same is the case where economically they want to be closer to the Middle East, but strategically they want to be closer to the USA, and they might be pushed further. They might make that mistake. I think it's doubtful, but it is possible.
Okay, we've run out of time. Ehsan, Safarnejad, and Tafhim Kiani, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you on the program. What do you think about the Saudi Arabian-Pakistani pact? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for joining us, and we certainly hope you have enjoyed this episode. Please do share and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Iran.